Acharya Shotar Shata Shri Śrīmad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Om Vishnu Pada Paramhamsa Parivakacharya Shotar Shata Shri Śrīmad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachari Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Brahmsako Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. New Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Gangamai Yamunamai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Tulasi Maharani Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution, Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Pichana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrachachana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrachachana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrachachana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrachachana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Sattva Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. This can be the founder of Srila Prabhupada ki. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki. All glorious to the assembled devotees, glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees, glorious to Shishi Guru and Gauranga, glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayadiraye nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati nashtiki. So reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, text 56. And I don't know, those who have some devices with you, maybe you can follow. 4:22:56. Rachetya dhan namadyeyam. Okay. Somaracha ivapara. Somaracha ivapara. Suryavad Vishrajan Grinan. Suryavad Vishrajan Grinan. Pratapamscha Puvovasu. Rajetyadhan namadyeyam. Rajetyadhan namadeyam. Somaracha ivapara. Suryavad Vishrajan Grinan. Suryavad Vishrajan Grinan. Pratapamscha Puvovasu.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu.
Rachetyadhan namadeyam.
Rajetyadam namadeyam.
Somaraja iva paraha.
Somaraja iva paraha.
Suryavad vishrijan grinan.
Suryavad vishrijan grinan.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu. Rajetyadam namadeyam.
Rachetyadhan namadeyam.
Somaraja iva paraha.
Somaraja iva paraha.
Suryavad vishrijam grinam.
Suryavad vishrijam grinam.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu.
Rajetyadam namadeyam.
Rajetyadam
Namadeyam.
Somaraja iva para.
Somaraja iva para.
Suryavat vishrijam grinam.
Suryavat vishrijam grinam.
Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu.
Pratapamscha
bhuvo vasu.
Vaishnavis. Rajetyadhan namadeyam. Somaraja iva paraha. Suryavad vishrijam grinam. Pratapamscha bhuvo vasu. Word per word. Raja, the king. Iti, thus. Adhat, took up. Namadeyam, of the name. Somaraja, the king of the moon planet. Iva, like. Aparaha, on the other hand. Suryavat, like the sun god. Vishrijan, distributing. Grinan, exacting. Pratapan, by strong ruling. Cha, also. Bhuvaha, of the world. Vasu, revenue. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Maharaj Prithu became as celebrated a king as Somaraj, the king of the moon. He was also powerful and exacting, just like the sun god, who distributes heat and light and at the same time exacts all the planetary waters. Purport. In this verse, Maharaj Prithu is compared to the kings of the moon and sun. The king of the moon and the king of the sun serve as examples of how the Lord desires the universe to be ruled. The sun distributes heat and light and at the same time exacts water from all planets. The moon is very pleasing at night, and when one becomes fatigued after the day's labor in the sun, he can enjoy the moonshine. Like the sun god, Prithu Maharaj distributed his heat and light to give protection to his kingdom, for without heat and light no one can exist. Similarly, Prithu Maharaj exacted taxes and gave such strong orders to the citizens and government that no one could had the power to disobey him. On the other hand, he pleased everyone just like the moonshine. Both the sun and the moon have particular influences by which they maintain order in the universe, and modern scientists and philosophers should become familiar with the Supreme Lord's perfect plan for universal maintenance. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Namo Bhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Paditanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again the text 422:56. Prithu Maharaj became as celebrated a king as Somaraj, the king of the moon. He was also powerful and exacting, just like the sun god, who distributes heat and light and at the same time exacts all the planetary waters. So we continue the description of the glories of Prithu Maharaj. I think the last days we heard about the sun and the moon dynasty, different kings from Ramdas. And yesterday we heard about leadership from Divya Singha Prabhu. So we continue with these descriptions. But Prithu Maharaj, who is the perfect example of a powerful ruler, and Prabhupada makes the point that the modern scientists and philosophers, they should learn, also in the last purport actually. Prabhupada says, even in this fallen age, if the rulers, governors and presidents take advantage of Prithu Maharaj's example, there will be certainly a region of peace and prosperity throughout the world. So Prabhupada emphasizes this point, that these lessons from the Bhagavatam actually are meant to be applied today. These are very powerful leadership principles, we can say. Now, nowadays, it's quite common that there's a lot of leadership gurus out there. They give their seminars and they explain what is good leadership. So, but here in the Bhagavatam we have very good examples, and Prithu Maharaj is one of these examples. Actually, my Guru Maharaj, he spoke a lot about Prithu. Whenever he was giving class and he could just choose a topic, he always spoke from the fourth canto, always on Prithu Maharaj. Of course, he was also interacting with leaders, scientists, so maybe that's why. And here, Prithu is compared to the sun and to the moon. And as Prabhupada says, they have particular influence on the universe, and one should understand. So it's quite interesting. And here is described the sun. The sun exacts water from all the places, and of course then in the form of cloud and rain distributes that water again to other places. Similarly, a king takes taxes or government and then gives it again distributed to all the citizens. But then also the sun is also, it's quite strong. The sun is also quite heavy. Whereas the moon is very nice. We can enjoy the moonshine. And I remember I heard this description that, also with Gaur-Nitai, Lord Nityananda is so smoothing the thousands of sun, like moon rays. And I was also wondering, what does it mean? Why is moon rays so nice? Until I went to India and experienced like 45 up. I think the highest I experienced was 49 degrees in Orissa. And then it's really hot. It's really hot. And then in the evening, when the sun, set, and you really stand underneath the moonlight, you know what it means. It's like you feel the cooling effect of the moon on your skin. It's a very nice experience. So whereas the sun is, of course, we need light. It says also here, we need fire and light and warmth to live. But the sun also can be sometimes a bit too intense and then burning. Some of us got some sunburn, like heavily sunburned. So, although we need sun, it's also, sun is described, I think, at least I remember in Buddhism, they say the sun is like the second heart, the heart of the universe. Like, because without sun, nobody can live. Without light, nobody can exist. At the same time, it can also be too heavy. And it's interesting in Jyotish, in astrology, the sun represents the father, the moon represents the mother, and the sun is also male and moon is female. Sun stands for the personality or ego also, and the moon stands for the mind. And these are one of the most important planets in a chart. If the moon is nicely situated, that means person is peaceful, sane, healthy, mental healthy. But if the moon is afflicted by some bad influences, then one has some disturbances. And of course, the sun also, it's important where is the sun situated. But again, there also, if other planets are too close to the sun, to Surya, then these planets can be burned, right? And then these other planets the influence gets weaker. So although the sun, it's a nice, good planet, but still it can be too intense, too much burning. So similarly, and it's also described here, so Prithu was strong like the sun, also in the sense that he gave strong orders to the citizens, and no one had the power to disobey him. So the king, he was strong like the sun, but at the same time also very pleasing like the moon. And this is described like a good leader. He is powerful like the sun and pleasing like the moon. Or there is other examples. We have this hard like a thunderbolt and soft like a rose. It's like seems to be quite the opposite qualities. But a mature personality, a leader, he should have both these qualities, because if you have to be strong, you have to in order to lead. But if you're too strong and everyone burns out, then who can you lead? Because everyone run away because you're too heavy. So you also have to have this softness. But if you're only soft, only nice to everyone, then everyone will do what they want. Nobody will follow you. So it requires the balance, and that can be challenging to develop these both qualities. Prabhupada also quoted a Bengali poet who said one should one should lead with the courage of an Englishman and with the heart of a Bengali mother. It's very nice, because Englishmen, obviously the English, they conquered so many countries. They conquered India, so the Englishmen are very strong, very courage, like a general. But the heart of a Bengali mother. And if you've been to India, if you know Indians, they can be so soft. Like also in Vrindavan, the Brishbasis, they're all men or women, also the men. Like they're so soft, isn't it? Like they have you can feel they have such a soft heart. They're so like children, almost like they have this childlike nature. And especially in Bengal, and especially a mother, a mother who has many children, and her heart is just so soft. She has just so much love. And to have this combination in one personality, it's quite amazing. Like very strong, at the same time very soft. So that's wanted. And Prithu was such a perfect leader. And of course, Srila Prabhupada also was such a personality. Srila Prabhupada was, he was heavy. He was really heavy. Prabhupada could be really strong. We have this, I think once I posted it in the chat. We have this statement. I think Govinda Das, he found this article. There was a newspaper article where an astrologer made a statement about Prabhupada. Like this man, he doesn't have ink in his pen, but there is fire in the pen. When he writes, it's like fire. It's like so heavy, and he kind of cuts through the illusion. He dispels ignorance by his words. This sadhu has such strong words. So that's on the one side, Prabhupada, and then of course Prabhupada. There's so many examples how Prabhupada was very strong and powerful. At the same time, Prabhupada was so also loving and so compassionate. Compassion was Prabhupada's main kind of quality that drove him to help all of us. So Prabhupada himself also manifested this wonderful quality. And I got a nice book. It's called Being a Srila Prabhupada Anuga. Being one who, Anuga means following, being one who follows Prabhupada. That's a book on leadership with quotes by Srila Prabhupada on leadership. And it's interesting. Leadership, of course, there's different ways to categorize, but in principle, we can say leadership can be divided in different sections, and one is, at least here we have, one is self-leadership, another one is people leadership, and one is organizational leadership. I think Peter Singer spoke yesterday about self-leadership. How, if you want to be a leader, then first you have to be able to manage yourself. Then it's all about how to manage other people, how to deal with others, how to interact with others, and then also how to organize things. So these are there's more division, but these are the main areas of leadership that are very important. So we maybe can just speak a little bit about these three areas, and I'll keep it a little short today. So first is self-leadership, and it's interesting also in Shastra, this is very much emphasized. Can you think of some shloka that emphasizes self-leadership?
An act of instruction.
Vajo vigam manasakroda vigam, jiva vigam udaropashta vigam, etan vigam yo vishahitadira, sarvam apimam pritvim sashishat. Yes, that's like the classic. And Prabhupada often quoted this also in regards to Guru Tattva. Who is a guru? A guru is one who is able to do that. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the action of anger and the urges of the tongue, belly and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So it's interesting, like he's a Goswami. Goswami, go means the senses. So the one who can control his own senses, he becomes qualified to control others. Leader means, you manage, you control. But before you can control, before you can lead, guide others, you first have to guide your own mind and your senses. And that's a very important principle. Otherwise, what kind of leadership will you be able to do? And there is another statement in the teaching of Rishabdev, which is also quite a famous shloka that Prabhupada often quoted, and quite sobering also. Guru nasasyat svajano nasasyat pita nasasya janami nasasyat daivam natatsyan napatishcha sasyan namocha yedya samupetya mrityum. One who cannot deliver his dependence from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipful demigod. It's like, are you able to deliver whoever is dependent on you? If yes, okay, good. If not, you shouldn't become either a leader, like a guru, or even a father or a mother. Like, it's quite shocking, like it shows the responsibility of Grihastha life also. If man and woman come together and they have children, their responsibility is to make these children Krishna conscious, or at least try their best to make them Krishna conscious, because that's the idea. And if they're not able to do so, then they better shouldn't have kids. So that again shows the responsibility of the self-leadership, in the sense that oneself has to be a very sober and advanced devotee in order to help others. That's the principle. And of course, Srila Prabhupada, again, by his personal example, he was very, very self-disciplined, or like he was a good example of self-leadership. He himself was, of course, he was a master of his senses fully, and by his example he showed that in many cases. And also Prabhupada was extremely self-controlled, or disciplined also. Many servants, they described that Prabhupada traveled around the world in the age of 70 to 82, 14 times. And then what did Prabhupada do? When he arrived at some place, he just adjusted his watch and then followed his daily routine. And he did that everywhere. There was no question of, oh my God, I had an 8-hour flight and I have a completely jet lag. I have to lay down now for 6 hours and just sleep. No. What is the time here? Oh, okay. 1 o'clock, it's time for my massage, or it's, I don't know, it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, time for my morning walk. Whatever the watch would say, he would just follow. And he did that always, everywhere. And that requires an immense discipline, and Prabhupada did it. And the young servants, like they were 20, 25, they were struggling a lot to follow up with Prabhupada. And it's interesting because, what Prabhupada did is, we know it's incredible what Prabhupada did actually. Coming with 70 to the West, alone, without knowing anyone, and then spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. It's like it's incredible. And someone, I think Keshav Maharaj told it, I do not remember, told the story how Shivaram Swami, I think in the 90s there was this issue with the manor. They wanted to close the manor, can you imagine, Bhaktivedanta manor? Because they got a problem with the neighbors, because so many cars always came. There was a certain street and the cars were parking all over the place. And the neighbors complained and they almost closed the manor. So there was a lot of struggle to, make sure that they can continue with the manor. So Shivaram Maharaj was the GBC at that time, or was involved. And Shivaram, that's some years back, so Shivaram Maharaj was younger. And then they engaged a lawyer, a very professional lawyer, and this was an elderly gentleman. And like these lawyers are, they when they deal with the case, they need to know about the background. So Shivaram Maharaj gave him some books, Prabhupada's books, and they have this speed reading, so they very quickly read. So he read several books of Prabhupada, including Prabhupada's library biography, Prabhupada Lamrita, And then when he gave the books back, he said, I read all of them. And like your teacher, he said, that's really good, very good philosophy, but I'm most impressed by your teacher. This man is amazing. He's amazing. And then Shiva Maharaj said, yes, we know. No, you don't know, he said. You don't know. And Shiva Maharaj, well, what do you mean, we don't know? No, we have dedicated our life to him. Of course, we know his glories. No, you don't know. And he said, you are a young man. I am in the same age. I am 70. I know what it means. No, what this man did in the age of 70, that's amazing. So he kind of glorified Prabhupada. Prabhupada had an amazing schedule and discipline, and in this way he gave by his own example, he showed how to be self-disciplined. And that principle of self-leadership. There's some statements, maybe I can read here about, this is a nice one. This is from a letter to Hridayananda, February 72. So, as president, now you will be forced to advance in Krishna consciousness, because you must always set the highest example yourself, and I think that is Krishna's special favor on you. Try to always see that the highest purity is maintained in all respects. Become yourself very confident of this Krishna conscious philosophy. Be always preaching and trying to understand some basic points from different angles of vision. Keep the devotees in your temple always satisfied and jolly, and that will be your success. Another one. Therefore, as a rigid principle, in every temple there should be class for hearing and chanting. Without hearing and chanting, to become a leader is impossible. You can become leader in the material world, but not in the spiritual world. So, you're setting, there's another letter to Jagadish, 73. You're setting a very good example in that yourself are going with the traveling party. The Vedic concept of the commander is that he must be in front in the fight, not that he sits back behind the lines. So these are some, Prabhupada makes the point that as a leader, the first one I like, now you take up responsibility, now you're forced to advance in Krishna consciousness. it's, like all of a sudden people see you as, oh, he or she has a certain position, then people look upwards, so immediately you have to, become more serious. So Krishna forces you, and this way actually Krishna tricks us to become more sober, more sincere. And the other principle was that hearing and chanting is part. Leadership means spiritual leadership, and one has to be an example of oneself. Okay, so these are some points on self-leadership. Now, another important aspect is this people leadership. Let me see. So what is people leadership? Here are some points. This is now not from Prabhupada, but just in general. Some description about people leadership. First, ability to build and maintain lasting relationships with devotees at all levels. So that one is able to have good relationships. Being capable of inspiring, engaging, training and nourishing devotees under one's care. Being effective at using appropriate communication styles based on time, place and audience. Being adaptable to work with teams. Ability to deal with and resolve negatives like conflicts, deviation, fall downs, etc. So these are some areas of people leadership. And of course, if you speak of leadership, it's not just the temple president or the GBC that are leaders. We are all leaders in some ways. No, as soon there is some younger devotees, then you're the leader for those. Or if you're a mother, you're the leader for your children. So we all have, every one of us is some leader in some capacity. And people leadership means that one is able to have this harmonious relationships amongst the devotees. And we find also in Shastra, we find many interesting shlokas on this. We can share one. This is a famous one from the Dhruva Lila, 4.8.34. Gunadikan mudam lipsed anukrosham gunadhamat maitrim samandan anvichen natapair abhiyuttate. So this Narada Muni instructs Dhruva, and we hear later on Dhruva Maharaj says, sorry, I can't follow this instruction. Why can Dhruva not follow? Because he's a kshatriya. He said, I'm kshatriya. He feels hurt and he wants revenge. But it's actually a nice instruction by Narada Muni. Narada Muni says, every man should act like this. When he meets a person more qualified than himself, he should be very pleased. When he meets someone less qualified than himself, he should be compassionate toward him. And when he meets someone equal to himself, he should make friendship with him. In this way, one is never affected by the threefold miseries of this material world. So three levels of people you meet. Someone is more qualified. So what you do? You become very happy. Nice, he's more qualified. So I can associate with him, learn from him. Someone is less qualified. Oh, he needs to learn. I feel compassion. Someone is equal. Let's have friendship. Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Shishigho Nitai Ki Jai. So if one acts like this, then one will be basically in a spiritual world. Narada Muni says one will not be affected by material miseries, because one always has good companionship. But what is the tendency of the conditioned soul? What do we do when we see someone is more advanced? Then we become envious. We become envious. What do we do when we find someone is lower than us, less qualified? What we do? Puffed up, or we try to manipulate and push the person even more down. And if someone is equal, then competition starts. You know very well. Do you know so well? So Prabhupada also knows, he says, generally, when we find someone more qualified than ourselves, we become envious of him. When we find someone less qualified, we deride him. When we find someone equal, we become very proud of our activities. These are the causes of all material tribulation. Instead of being oppressive to the less qualified man, one should be compassionate toward him, just to raise him to the proper standard. When one meets an equal, instead of being proud of one's own activities before him, one should treat him as a friend. one should also have compassion for the people in general who are suffering due to forgetfulness of Krishna. These important functions will make one happy within this material world. So it's a very nice instruction, and it fits very well to the topic of people leadership, because if one can create such a culture of respect, then one will have harmonious relationship amongst each other. In the same canto, 4 canto, we find also the Prachetas. Prachetas perform tapasya, and then Vishnu actually appears and he says, I'm so satisfied with all of you. Why? Because you have worked so nicely together. And Prabhupada gives an amazing purport. He says there that actually in Krishna consciousness there is not two opinions, there can only be one opinion. In a sense that at the end of the day we all want to please Krishna. Yes, we may have different ideas how to serve Krishna, but at the end, as a devotee, we always want to please Krishna. That's why there's always unity, Prabhupada says, ideally. So people leadership. Let me see that I have some shloka here. Yeah, of course, this is a famous one. Our society is like one big family, and our relationship should be based on love and trust. We must give up the fighting spirit and use our intelligence to push ahead. You should accept help from your God brothers. It's interesting, Prabhupada also gave very much emphasis on that the leadership are respected. Like, there's so many incidents where devotees came and complained about the temple president, and Prabhupada always kind of protected the temple president. Prabhupada gave a lot of power to the temple presidents. Because Prabhupada knew if people don't follow the authority, how can you manage? You know, if you're a leader, you need to manage a place. You can only manage the place if people follow. Otherwise, it's not possible. So Prabhupada understood this principle, and that's why I always emphasized. So the authority must be accepted under all circumstances, not that there will be fighting amongst you. This fighting spirit will destroy everything. But what can I do? You American and European boys are trained up in this fighting attitude. You're trained up. Now put it aside and simply work cooperatively for spreading this movement all over the world. Letter to Bali Mardana. So in principle, in general, we always have this fighting spirit, competition, but Prabhupada always emphasized, try to cooperate. And of course, people leadership also means if you're respectful and humble, then others will, just follow you by your own example. We know that famous incident. Prabhupada spoke about the 4, classes of people: first class, second, third, and fourth class. And then one person in the audience, challenging, asked Prabhupada, "So you think you're the first class, right?" Because he sat on a Vyasa-san, he's the guru. Prabhupada, very sober, said, "No. I'm 5th class. I'm serving all the other 4 classes. I'm a servant of everyone else." So, and of course, with this humility, Prabhupada won the heart of everyone. And the last one is organizational leadership, which is also important. One has to be able to manage things and organize things properly. Let me see here. Yeah, organizational leadership could be understood as creating clear and inspiring vision and purpose, defining clear roles and responsibilities, creating systems and policies, and design and employ appropriate strategies for sustainable expansion. So these are organizational leadership, and that's also very important. And Prabhupada emphasized this very much. He gave the example that yes, he is traveling around the world, he's preaching, he's speaking Krishna Katha, but he also goes to the bank and he makes sure that everything is fine with the finances. So Prabhupada wanted his followers and leaders to do the same, to be on the top of things and organize things properly. There is a famous story in 77 when Prabhupada was about to leave his body and was in Vrindavan. Different servants, they took care of Prabhupada, had different shifts. And Giriraj Swami, or Giriraj, that time Brahmachari, had the night shift. And then Giriraj was called by Prabhupada in the middle of the night. And Giriraj came and, "Yes, Prabhupada." And Prabhupada looked at him and said, how this movement will go on after I leave. And then Giriraj, well, if we follow the principle and chant, and Prabhupada just said, intelligence and organization, I think he said. Intelligence, organization. Giriraj was like, usually we emphasize the purity and chanting and the spiritual side, which of course is the basis, is important. But Prabhupada pointed out, it also requires intelligence and organization. And of course Prabhupada himself, again, was very expert in organizing things and managing things, dealing with problems. And he was very clever and expert and in order to expand Krishna consciousness. There was, I forgot the details, but something like this. Badri Narayan Maharaj tells the story how in Detroit they looked for a new building, and they found one building which was just perfect. It was like a villa, marble, stone, and they even on the walls there were even some peacock carved. Like it was like perfect for a temple. Prabhupada really loved it and really want to have it. And then they dealt with this landlord, and Prabhupada pushed down the price like anything, and the landlord even almost started to cry, that it's not possible. And Prabhupada said, well, we are not rich, we are professional beggars, we're just spiritual people, you have to give it to us, it will be for your benefit. And Prabhupada pushed the price down and down. At the end the person surrendered and they signed the contract, and everyone was amazed, how is it possible? Building otherwise costs a few millions, and Prabhupada got it for, I don't know, 100, 200,000 or something dollars. And they even didn't have the money, but somehow they managed to get the building. And then some days later, the neighbors, they called up to the temple and they said, hey, this landlord, he's stealing, he broke into the building. So they came there and they saw this previous owner who had sold the building was taking off pictures from the wall and removing some statues and stealing. and then the devotees came, what's going on? He was like shouting, your Swamiji cheated me, he cheated me, your Swamiji cheated me. And he wanted, he was so desperate, so frustrated, he wanted at least take something he maybe still could turn into money because he lost so much money. And when the devotees told to Prabhupada was just like, yes, I'm a Kolkata boy. I'm a Kolkata boy. So Prabhupada was very expert, in many ways, in expanding Krishna consciousness and managing his worldwide movement. So in this way, we can learn here from today's shloka in the Bhagavatam that Prithu was just like the sun, distributing and also being very strong, and he was also compassionate, like the moon, or as he said, leading with the courage of an Englishman, or with the heart, and at the same time with the heart of a Bengali mother. And Srila Prabhupada certainly was such a leader. We can take inspiration and example from also. Hare Krishna. Any realizations, questions, comments? Yes.
Hare Krishna. Question. You were quoting Prabhupada, how he said this fighting spirit, and then he said, "You Westerners, Europeans, that's your disease." Right?
Yeah, you're trained in fighting.
Yeah. And I remember first time I went to India, and I was observing also the devotee communities, and I then sometimes found, that this particular leader might be very eccentric, and for me as a Westerner, very hard to, accept that, wow, such an eccentric personality, and even thinking it's obvious, there's some fault. How can they just accept? And of course now after some time I understand how in India they have such a strong culture that the leader is accepted, even if there is some fault, they will follow. And
My question is, even though we see there is some, if you look in India, there is a lot of difficulties also in the devotee community, but then compared to in the West, it works better. You can see they have huge communities and ashrams with hundreds of devotees, and there is difficulties, but they can do much more because they have a certain structure. And in the West, it's often very difficult to bring so many people together and work cooperatively, because this mentality, everybody's questioning everyone. So then I'm often wondering, how should we just adjust things to our mentality, or should we
It's a very good question.
try to change, or should we do kind of both, and how to approach that?
It's a very good question. Yeah, like in India or in Vedic culture, it's a very clear hierarchy and also some understanding of the importance of leadership, and natural people follow a leader, and that's why it's more dynamic. And here in the West, we are so much kind of, it's all about democracy and kind of, no clear leader, and everyone is doing what they want. Like the other day, you were there, one devotee said, in Switzerland we don't need a GBC. We don't need. It's like, we don't need. It's like, okay, we don't need.
Very nice to hear if you're in the process of
we don't need it. No, we don't need you. And many devotees think like this. We're doing fine. We don't need someone to tell us what we do. We don't need a leader. Why do we need? And then also in many places not temple prayers. We make a board. There's only and together we make decisions. We don't need one person. This mentality is very much there. It's interesting. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, the Indian scientist monk. He's brilliant. You all know him. He has his podcast, the Monk's Podcast. He's a disciple of Radhanath Maharaj, Brahmachari, and he was previously a scientist like many of these Jopati devotees. But he has a very brilliant mind, and he has written hundreds of articles on Gita, Bhagavad Gita, like Gita wisdom for today. He has a blog, he has his podcast, he interviews devotees. And he shares his experience when he came for the first time to the West. He has preached extensively in America and Australia and other places. So when he came to the West, the first thing he noticed that there is such a difference when it comes to this culture of authority or leadership. Even amongst the ISKCON guru and disciples, Like he tells a story how he was in a room, and then there was a guru in one room, and there was a disciple sitting outside, like on a couch or so. And then the guru comes out, and and the disciple just remains seated, and they have a very casual conversation. And he was observing the situation. He was like, "Wow, in India, if the guru comes, immediately we would stand up, offer obeisances, and how can I serve?" And he noticed that in the West, it seems like this hierarchy is much more, like that mood of we are all equal, we're on the same level, is very much prevalent in the West. And it's not like so clearly different like in India. And he noticed that. And so your question is, when it comes now to Krishna consciousness, should we just adjust, or do we have to kind of establish more this? Well, I guess it is also quite different from place to place. I've seen in Germany, for example, they want a leader. They want to follow a leader. It's more, it seems to be like that. We can say from the historical point it was also there, but also I can see it's they. Of course, there is also, but in Switzerland we can see, they're so critical, so hard, and also the history has shown, like there are several GPCs have been rejected by the Swiss devotees in the past. The Swiss devotees, no, this is not going to work for us. It's like very, Kadama Maharaj made a nice point. There is this Namras podcast. Some of you maybe know. It's nice. It's a podcast-like conversation between different ISKCON leaders and devotees. So Namras, based in New York, he interviewed Kadama Maharaj, who is, about to leave us because he has cancer. So of course it was interesting to talk to him and hear his realizations. And then they spoke about leadership also, and Maharaj made the point that, of course, now in these final days, he's not so much concerned about the institution, he's more concerned about the people. He wants to invest his time not talking about institutional matters, but talking about the people and making sure that the people are nourished. And then he made the point, the future leadership that he envisions is not so much legislative, but more inspirational. Legislative means you're making rules. And this is more the ISKCON style that we know from the past and still up to date. The GBC, they make rules, and you have to follow these rules. And you don't chant Radhe Radhe. You may do it on Radhastami, or otherwise, like the rules. And it's kind of a little bit, like. Of course, rules are required, and that's one of the job of the leaders to establish rules. That's why that's the sun aspect, or the hard as a thunderbolt. Sometimes you have to have clear rules. But then on the other side, inspiration is also and Kadama Karma makes a point. Maybe it requires more the inspirational kind of leadership, because if devotees feel inspired by the leader or by the philosophy, by Krishna consciousness, they maybe much more naturally will follow. And that should be given more emphasis. And of course, here again comes self-leadership and people leadership. If someone has purity and he is able to deal with the people, then naturally this inspiration can be there. But without purity and without people skill, that will be difficult. Sometimes we have leaders, they're very paka, they're very strong, and they're also good managers, but maybe they're not able to deal with people, and then it becomes difficult. So I would say, maybe especially in the West, it requires more this kind of inspirational leadership, because people will not automatically just follow the authority. In India, maybe it's more easy. But in the West especially, it requires more that inspirational leadership. Oh, now Nanda is coming from the kitchen. Yes, give the mic to Nanda.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. I very much enjoying the class.
Hare Krishna.
I just had and thank you for your question. I think it was very pertinent question, that so different.
Yeah.
I just thought that yes, as a conditioned souls, we have an extra aversion to be subordinate, in the very beginning to start with. Then, of course, in India, maybe there is more piety, so you also get leaders who are maybe a bit more concerned, or, of course, your point was a little bit different, that there's, of course, leaders many qualities, but in here in Switzerland you mentioned that maybe some devotees are not so much inclined, perhaps due to some bad, not so favorable experiences in the past, that some hurt was there, or this or that.
That's the history of the Western civilization. That they found
the whole civilization.
That's why now we don't want to have kings or monarchy, because
there is some discrepancy. Yeah, and just a small reflection. I thought about the leader, why he is given, how great they are, and how to understand how difficult the job is done. For example, if now, from tomorrow, you need to fulfill the same tasks as, for example, a sun or a moon, or our temple president, or then you start really feeling, oh my God, it requires this.
A lot of expectation.
It's so much.
It's very hard to fulfill.
So much job, and we often take it for granted. These positions. That, for example, who thought about sun? Will sun come today? Who thought about it? Will there be enough heat and light? No one thought about it. But if we would from tomorrow need to, heat up all 7 planetary systems, please, give enough light, keep it becomes very difficult. So yeah, I'm just reflecting from a position of a very small, tiny being.
Like the developing this gratitude for leaders, what actually they're going through. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, any other points or questions? Then we can all take great inspiration from Srila Prabhupada, who was the perfect leader. We can all try to follow in his footsteps. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Untitled Chapter. Hari Hari. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Mancha Kalpanta.
the ground is a little difficult. That's okay, we can leave that, I think, we just cover it. And that, yeah, that's another question, that's a little difficult. It's all wrapped up. Yeah.
It has to be restored.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see.
Somewhat.
Also, I'll cut off the metal bar there. One.
Oh, that's good.
Well, the metal bar I cut off here also. So, yeah, something here. Is that? Also, yeah, I'm not sure about here, it was a little higher here, because maybe we need to add some, to adjust here.
Yeah, no, this one.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, only can be put here or any some support from the floor.
Yeah, that's true. And then it's still thing is,
I can move it.
would be good to easy, if possible, to easily remove maybe one metal here and here, just like that.
Metal.
Yeah, to go like this, yeah, yeah. That's, yeah. Because it's small thing, then you can easily still change that if you need it needs to be replaced or something like that. You know, then small one maybe also okay, but that would be the metal interest actually. Yeah, maybe you need to buy also. Yeah, your choice. Yeah. Also, this one was needs to be glued maybe. I don't know. What do you think? It's on. Yeah. Not know if you want to do it or just put it on. There was some screw from underneath. Maybe you can.
This is the idea of this wood. Something. You cannot really.
I don't know.
This is just.
It was here also, and I was not so sure.
You need to know that now, that it looks exactly wrong with this.
Yeah. That doesn't look important to me actually. It was not glued on these, so I don't know. Maybe that was the idea. I don't want to do that. Yeah. But I had to rip off and didn't manage to open this. So yeah, I go here to because I needed to cut this in. So it's the screws stick out a little. Maybe remove the screws and do it or something. Okay, let's go for it. Thank you.